It was late August 2007 in Kernen, near Stuttgart, Germany. Local residents had reported an unbearable stench that had been getting worse for days. Eventually, police divers pulled the first object from the murky waters of the Neckar River. They were heavy, misshapen, and coated in cement. Then came another and another, each one encased in hardened concrete, deliberately weighted and meant to sink and vanish forever. But something had gone wrong. As authorities cracked open the cement, the brutal truth was revealed. Human remains, dismembered, carefully hidden and scattered piece by piece along the riverbed. This was grotesque. Authorities questioned who was the victim and who had gone to such gruesome lengths to erase them. This case takes a few turns, so stick with me, but it's one that is as much brutal as it is sad. I can't imagine how it must feel spending your days living in your home, smelling a decomposing corpse, as it just keeps getting worse. As usual, with German cases, many full names and identities have not been revealed to the public, so I may only be able to give you some first names. And there are not many images of the perpetrators, so please bear with me, as this case deserves to be told. But before we dive in, if you find this video fascinating, then please drop it a like and leave me a comment below. And if you are new here, then please hit the subscribe button and consider following me on Instagram. It all really helps. Thank you. And you're gonna have to bear with me on this video, as I've got a really bad voice. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. The case begins with 18-year-old Dennis E., who grew up in a town next to Kernen. Born to Turkish and Croatian parents, Dennis was officially classified as Turkish. At school, Dennis had a reputation for being aggressive and intimidating. In fact, his behaviour escalated so severely that he was expelled after showing classmates a disturbing video of a murder and threatening a girl in his class by telling her he'd commit the same brutal act on her. His family must have been wealthy, as his father bought him a Mercedes on his 18th birthday, and this is how he would spend most of his time, driving around and getting up to no good. Despite his macho exterior, Dennis struggled with women, who perhaps sensed danger beneath his charm. But all this changed on February 7th, 2007, when he became besotted with a 16-year-old female called Sessen. Sessen was raised in Germany by Eritrean parents. They wanted a better life for her and gave her the best surroundings for a good education. She is described by friends as very extroverted and hyper. When she was in the room, you definitely knew she was there. Before meeting Dennis, she had just completed a training year with the aim of becoming a paralegal. Things at this point are going well in her life, but quickly, things start to change once she is with Dennis. Her parents notice a sharp decline in her behaviour and they disapprove of their relationship. Sessen began skipping school and her grades began to suffer. She just preferred to hang out in Dennis's car and get up to what teenagers do. Education just didn't seem important to her now. Quickly, Dennis became obsessed with Sessen and even possessive. They frequently have arguments, as Dennis is an extremely jealous individual. It got to the point where he made Sessen delete all the male contacts from her phone and even started buying her new SIM cards once a month to make sure she was only speaking to him. What would later turn out to be a fatal mistake was at the beginning of their relationship, Sessen told Dennis that she was still a virgin. But when it later came out that this was not true, Dennis went crazy. He became even more extreme and volatile. He began to hit his own mother and smash up the family home on a regular basis. He also became physically violent with Sesson and even more controlling. If Sesson was out with her female friends, she would have to check in with him at the end of the night. She always had to make time for him, or there would be consequences. Sesson's friends would later say that she was afraid of Dennis, but at the same time, she could not live without him. This toxic relationship simply could not last. And on the 12th of August 2007, the couple have a major argument, resulting in Sesson finally building up the courage to leave Dennis. Dennis, however, comes up with a new plan to manipulate Sesson further. He writes her a letter, telling her that he intends to end everything, and even gave her a time and a place of when he would do it. Now to me, this doesn't seem sincere, but rather a way to force her to communicate with him. But this is just my opinion. Alarmed and worried, Sesson arrived at the designated location, and surprisingly, Dennis's twisted plan succeeded. She returned to him, once again trapped in this dangerous grasp. Consumed by jealousy, Dennis demanded that Sesson write down the names of every man she'd slept with. Reluctantly, she gave him a list containing 7 names. Dennis immediately vowed revenge, declaring he would kill every one of them. Shortly afterwards, Dennis approached his 23-year-old friend, Kai, casually asking about the best way to kill someone. Kai himself was troubled, having faced a difficult upbringing. He grew up in care after he was abandoned by both his parents. He asked no questions, he simply gave Dennis an answer. This conversation confirmed Dennis's deadly intentions, showing just how serious he was about carrying out this threat. Dennis wasted no time. He immediately went to the first man's home, knocking on his door. Fortunately, no one answered. Undeterred, he moved swiftly to the second target on the list. This time, when the man opened the door, Dennis unleashed a brutal assault without hesitation. It was only the quick intervention of the victim's mother, who threw herself between them, that ended the violent attack. A few days later, Dennis turned his attention to the third name on the list, an 18-year-old named Jan Schneider. When Sesson revealed to Dennis that Jan didn't just sleep with her, but in fact forced himself on her, Dennis's fury exploded. His desire for vengeance grew dangerously intense, and Jan became the next target. Before continuing this case, I want to tell you a little bit about Jan Schneider. He was born on October 14th, 1988, in Alsace in France. Jan moved to Kernen, Germany in 1990 with his parents Pierre and Fabienne, after his father accepted a job as a musical therapist. Alongside his 2 younger siblings, Camille and Pierre, Jan grew up in a caring, tight-knit family. He was very supportive of his younger siblings and regularly spoke to his grandparents back in France. Family was central to his life. At school, Jan was well-liked and popular. The girls fancied him and the boys wanted to be friends with him. He was also an excellent athlete, particularly gifted in handball. He played for the school team and even coached a younger girls' team in his spare time. Sports were more than just a hobby. Jan thought that he could maybe turn handball into a career someday, but for now he was studying to either be a physiotherapist or get into sports management. By 2007, at age 19, Jan was preparing to graduate. He had big plans after finishing school. He intended to travel with friends, exploring either France or the United States. Jan was bright, ambitious, and enthusiastic about life. He was a young man full of optimism and promise. However, very soon his life would dramatically and tragically end. On the evening of August 20th, 2007, Jan Schneider received an unexpected call from Sesson, who was calling from a payphone. She asked if he could give her a handball tutoring session later that night. Jan, always helpful and eager to earn some extra cash, agreed, completely unaware that just days earlier, Sesson had accused him to Dennis of forcing himself on her. That same evening, Jan attended his usual handball training, followed by a gym session. Afterwards, he relaxed briefly with his teammates, drinking a beer and smoking a cigarette. Then suddenly, Jan got up and hurried off, without mentioning where he was going. He quickly stopped by his house to change, putting on jeans, trainers and a hoodie, along with a baseball cap. As he left, his sister playfully teased him about his outfit. Jokingly, she said, "It's dark outside anyway, no one's going to see you." Around 9 p.m, Jan met up with Sesson, who led him along a quiet country lane near Hummershausen, guiding him through a meadow towards an abandoned villa. At approximately 9:20 p.m, they suddenly encountered Dennis and his friend Roma, who was also 18. Roma had a troubled upbringing with an abusive, alcoholic father, but he was now in the army. Approaching casually, the two men asked Jan for a light. Oblivious that this was Sesson's boyfriend, Jan reached into his pocket for a lighter. Without warning, Dennis swung a baseball bat, striking Jan viciously across the temple. The friendly meeting instantly turned into a brutal ambush. As Jan collapsed to the ground, Dennis and Roma unleashed their full rage, repeatedly hitting him with a bat and violently stomping on his head, torso and groin. Throughout the brutal assault, Sesson stood silently nearby, watching without trying to help. Shockingly, Dennis paused several times during the attack to approach her, reassuring her that he was proving his love, even stopping to kiss her before returning to the ruthless beating. He was stomped on, kicked, beaten with fists and a baseball bat. Even though Jan himself was athletic, the attack caught him by surprise, and he could not defend himself. The violence continued with Roma hitting him with the bat, and Dennis kicking him in the head as hard as he could, until Jan lay lifeless in the grass. Later, Roma described the attack, and quote, "It was like adrenaline. We were all out of control. But what about Sesson? Isn't she trying to stop her boyfriend and his buddy? Does she call the police? Does she scream for help? She just stands there, a few meters away, and simply watches." At only 19, Jan, whose promising life was ahead of him, lay dead in a field. Afterwards, Dennis and Roma calmly smoked cigarettes. Then they casually picked up Jan's body and loaded it into Dennis's Mercedes. They drove to a warehouse owned by Dennis's father, where they dumped his body. After dropping off Sesson at her home, Dennis and Roma returned to Dennis's house and just watched films and got high, as if the evening's horrific events were nothing more than routine. When Jan failed to return home that night, his sister Camille immediately began calling his friends. She was worried, as this was completely out of character. By the next day, panic had fully set in, and Jan's family reported him missing. They had no idea what might have happened. Had he suffered an accident? Was he lost somewhere? Jan's family knew he was popular and had many friends, so surely no one wanted to cause him harm. The search for Jan began. Meanwhile, Dennis, unfazed and emotionless, once again approached his friend Kai. This time, Dennis bluntly asked him how to dispose of a body. Without hesitation or questions, Kai casually advised him to cut up the body into pieces, encase them in cement-filled plant pots, and dump them in the river. Kai went even further, offering to help Dennis carry out the grisly task. Together with Roma, they immediately went to the hardware store to gather supplies. The horrific dismemberment took place in a basement flat in Kernan, belonging to Kai's friend, 23-year-old Layla Kay. who was away at the time. Over the next 2 days, Dennis, Roma and Kai cut Jan's body into 14 pieces. Dennis would later say he found this disgusting and he threw up several times during the process. Sesson was not innocent in this part either, as she cleaned the apartment, removing as much blood as she could. To transport Jan's remains, Dennis borrowed his father's van. They filled plant pots with cement, embedding the body parts inside, and began disposing of them in the Neckar River. However, the torso was too large and heavy, so they decided to cement it inside a large wheelie bin. When they found the bin was impossible to move due to its weight, they resorted to breaking it into smaller, manageable pieces, which they continued discarding into the river over several nights. After each gruesome session, the group calmly returned to their everyday lives, as if nothing horrific had happened. Then, on August 27th, 2007, an unsettling smell seeped from a rented basement apartment in Kernan. At first, the neighbours brushed it off as rotten food or perhaps a dead animal was trapped somewhere. But as the days passed, the stench grew more intense and disturbing, suggesting something darker. Residents grew uneasy and contacted the flat's owner, who sent a caretaker to inspect. The flat was that of Layla K. The caretaker could only go within 30 meters of the apartment before he knew something was terribly wrong. The smell of decay was overwhelming. Sensing the gravity of what awaited him behind the locked door, he did not want to go inside alone, so instead he phoned the authorities. Police and firefighters quickly arrived. They too knew that something was terribly wrong, and once they broke down the door, the full stench was released. It was sickening. Inside, they found clothes and rags that were drenched in blood scattered across the floor, along with large drops of cement. A radio was blaring at full volume, and a blood-stained cleaver lay in the living room. In the bathroom, there is a large wheelie bin standing in the bathtub. They knew something horrific had certainly taken place. As they moved through the flat, the sense of dread intensified, until finally, in a utility room, they discovered the source of the horrifying odour. A blue IKEA bag lay in a thick pool of blood, covered in flies. Inside it was a large cement block that clearly concealed something gruesome. They quickly worked out that it was human remains, and with Jan reported missing, officers were sent to his house to try and get some DNA to make a match on the body. In his bedroom, they gathered some cigarette butts, and then it was confirmed. Then the family were told the horrific news. It did not take the authorities long to apprehend the perpetrators, as when they contacted Layla K, she told them that Kai had access to the apartment, and thus Dennis, Roman and Sesson were also quickly apprehended. The case gained huge media attention and was dubbed the Cement Murders. What shocked the people of Germany the most was the age of the offenders. They were all considered youths. During interrogations, Dennis, Roma and Sesson remained silent, refusing to admit any involvement. Kai was the only one who showed any remorse. Eventually overcome by guilt, Kai broke down, revealing every chilling detail of the murder and disposal of Jan's body. Surprisingly, he implicated Dennis's father as well, alleging that he had not only provided the van, but had also actively helped remove the body parts from the apartment. Dennis's father strongly denied this, insisting he simply lent his son the van. The trial began in February 2008. Jan's devastated family fought hard to have Dennis and Roma tried as adults, but the court decided that they would be prosecuted under juvenile law. This decision was based on their age and the psychological assessment of Dennis, who was diagnosed with deep depression and pathological jealousy, rendering him not fully culpable for his actions. This decision sparked public outrage across Germany. In court, Jan's grieving family wore t-shirts with the message saying, "Violence never helps." They repeatedly left the courtroom as the harrowing details became too much to bear, but they wanted to be there for Jan. They questioned, why Jan? Why their son? Tragically, it emerged during the trial that Jan never forced himself on Sesson. In fact, he barely knew her, having only occasionally tutored her in handball. But why did Sesson include Jan on the list? And why fabricate such a damning accusation? It was rumoured that perhaps Jan had rejected her romantic advances, and that caused her to seek revenge, though this has never been confirmed. Ultimately, Jan was a completely innocent victim, caught in a web of jealousy and lies. When asked if she knew about the plan to murder Jan, why she didn't intervene during the brutal attack, or why she called Jan from a payphone, Sesson simply replied, "I didn't think anything, I was just spaced out." She insisted she had simply followed what Dennis instructed. Kai's testimony stunned the courtroom when questioned about why he helped dismember Jan's body. Instead of notifying the authorities, he said, "Dennis was like a brother to me. It was obvious that I would help. The body was there. The body had to go. That explains everything." Dennis and Roma stayed silent throughout the proceedings, appearing detached and emotionless. Their lawyers spoke on their behalf, revealing no insight into their motives or remorse. Ultimately, Dennis and Roma were tried under juvenile law and received the maximum sentence of 10 years each, while Sesson was sentenced to just 9 years. Kai, who was aged 23, was tried as an adult and received 3.5 years for aiding and abetting the murder. 1 year after sentencing, authorities attempted to prosecute Dennis's father and Layla Kay, the apartment owner, for their suspected roles in disposing of the body. However, no conviction followed due to insufficient evidence. Today, all the perpetrators have completed their sentences and returned to normal life. But Dennis's fate was more complicated. A year before his scheduled release, authorities attempted to transfer him to an adult prison due to his continued lack of remorse and unchanged behaviour. But this was legally impossible. Instead, he was deported to Turkey, where his family originated from, despite having spent his entire life in Germany. While all the perpetrators carry on with their lives, Jan is dead, and his family are left to pick up the pieces. Tragic. I couldn't believe they all eventually walked free. They were young, but that crime showed so much premeditation. It does feel like justice was not served. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.